Yes, yes. Last time I didn't know I can individually allow people to record. So this time I know, and I think I've just given to you.
Hare Krishna. Fine. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Please my obeisance. Panchakalpa Vichaka Vismi Vichapa Janam Pavani Go Vaishnavi Go. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Good to see you all. Oh, so Marla, you RSVP'd through Meetup, right?
I beg your pardon?
You RSVP'd through the Meetup website, right?
That's right.
Okay, so you know how to do it. Okay. Because I think you maybe sent some message to us, right?
Yeah, well, it said RSVP, so I sent it a couple different ways, but then finally I just wound up scrolling and I found the Zoom login, so.
Oh, good. Okay.
Is RSVP necessary, or does it just always show up with the Zoom?
Either way. I think it's okay. If you know how to do it, then you can log in, because now we know you, so it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And welcome Arvind from California. Welcome back. Eula Priti on the front lines, helping protect people's lives and save them in New York. And Bhakti Gaurav, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo, Bhakti Sasha, and Paul, Hare Krishna. And Carmen, two Pauls. Is one of those Pauls Paul and Andrea? I think so. Okay. And Carmen Gloria, Hare Krishna. Okay. So well, I think has everyone here attended a program where we had Chandrasekhar Maharaj as our guest? Okay, almost everyone, almost. So Chandrasekhar Swami has been regularly attending these programs probably since towards the beginning. So, and we've had the program going on for now, this is the 10th year, so towards the beginning of that. And Chandrasekhar Swami also was attending our programs back when we were having them in Long Island too. And Maharaj is a disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and is in the renounced order of life known as Sannyas. And so Maharaj is dedicated to using his time and energy to support for the maintenance and the spreading of the founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada's Hare Krishna movement, maintaining and spreading it. And he's doing a great job of it, and we're happy that he's doing that focused in the greater New York metropolitan area. So that includes New Jersey, Queens, Long Island, and Manhattan and Brooklyn, among other places. And Maharaj has also spent time during his tenure within the within his spiritual career within the Hare Krishna movement in a community we have in West Virginia known as New Vrindavan, and also in Asia and Southeast Asia. And Maharaj is always working hard, and he's, if you spend time with him, you know that he's also his analysis, he really gets deeply involved in analyzing the points in Srila Prabhupada's teachings, and we get to experience that when we attend his classes. So that's enough for my introduction, I think. So now we'll get on, we'll start the program. So we'll begin with Kirtan for 5 minutes approximately. And Maharaj will both be the leader and the responder in the Kirtan, but I would encourage everyone to respond after each time he says the Hare Krishna mantra, please respond in your own homes, even though you'll be muted, because Zoom works better that way. And then we'll have class till about 7, and then we'll have another 5-minute or so kirtan. And also, I won't say anything more than this, but based on my conversation with Chandrasekhar Swami earlier today, he'll say something about something significant that occurred earlier today, something that's both unfortunate and in one sense fortunate. Maharaj will, I'll let Maharaj speak about that as he likes, during the class. During the class, he'll prompt you for questions and comments, and at the end. Okay, so Maharaj, shall I leave it to you now?
All right. So how long is the kirtan supposed to go for?
About 5 minutes, just because of the fact that we can only hear the leader chanting instead of each other.
Right.
So just to make sure the people's attention span remains strong.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Samin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvisesa Sunabadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine Nirvisesa Sunabadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Atto Tarasata Shri Shrimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantarad Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premananda. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Dapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna and Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Okay, so welcome to the Bhagavad Gita Zoom online or on YouTube if you're watching it there. Maybe there's a few of you who haven't heard, but as of last night, Bhakti Charu Swami left this world. He was battling with COVID-19. And he was ventilated, and there was a long struggle. But that struggle ended last night with him departing his material body to go to the spiritual world. So I thought I'd try to say a few things from what little realization I have. The first thing that occurred to me when I learned of this passing of Bhakti Charu was a phrase that I've heard spoken by people in the past. And the idea is that one should live their life in a way so that when we are born, naturally, we cry and the world rejoices. And we should try to live our lives in a way that when we die, it's the other way around, that we rejoice and the world cries. That shows that a person has affected the world in a very positive way. When many people feel bereaved by the fact that this person is no longer with us. So when you are born, you cry and the world rejoices, but live your life in a way where when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. So Bhakti Charu Swami was the emblem of Vaishnav gentlemanliness, the perfect Vaishnava. He was someone who was hard to find any fault with, hard to be offended by, because he always watched what he was doing very, very carefully. And he had many difficult situations in his life. I think the most recent one was this whole episode in New York where getting the temple back, there were so many difficult feelings among Vaishnavas during that time. But he managed to pull through it in a way where he, I thought, did amazing, had an amazing effect on the congregation and was able to deal with issues that were tough. And we knew they were tough, and there was no easy way around them. There was just no easy way around them. And yet, he did not offend. He did not become irate. He did not become accusative. He did not become any of those things, although it was easy for any of those to happen. And there were those who, in fact, did become all of those things. So once Prabhupada was asked, how would I know one of your disciples if I saw one? And Prabhupada replied, that disciple would be a perfect gentleman or lady. And I know of no one who fits that description better than Bhakti Charu Swami. He was gentle, soft-spoken, clear, knowledgeable in Scripture, able to rise to a situation, to understand it, and to have and connect people in such a way that they could work together toward a common goal. Now, of course, that is gone. It's hard to know exactly how and in what many ways this will affect our movement. He was, of course, known for a lot of things, but one of the things that Bhakti Charu Swami was well known for was his Abhaycharan video series that he did the videography on. He conceived of it and produced and directed it. He made in video form a story of Prabhupada's life, which is in itself an amazing thing. If someone from any walk of life watches that story, they will see the life of a person in a way that, these days people find it hard to become comfortable with books. So this is a way that they could encounter Prabhupada's life in a non-book way. So this was a very wonderful project, and it took quite a lot of time and quite a lot of resources. Bhakti Charu Swami was active on many continents, and he was well liked with the Indians and with the Western devotees as well, and he could communicate with many people in different languages. Particularly, what's notable, one of the things that Bhakti Charu Swami accomplished was the translation of Prabhupada's books from English back into Bengali. So it's kind of interesting that Bengali was Prabhupada's original language, and he was translating into English. And Bhakti Charu Swami did the inverse of that. He took the English translations of Prabhupada and put them back into Bengali for those who are native Bengali speakers. And of course, the other major accomplishment that stands out, at least in my immediate memory, is the founding of the temple at Ujjain, where he managed to collect the funds and, more importantly, to build a congregation, a large congregation, to worship Krishna in Ujjain. So I never saw the temple, but he was the one who had the character to be able to pull together all those people. This is actually, I think, one of the measures of a Vaishnava, is the fact that they don't offend anyone, and that when they're involved, they can somehow melt together, somehow fuse together the efforts of many people who probably on their own would never have worked with one another. They work together because there's a central pivot, a central focus, a cynosure, someone who is able to gain the trust and the credibility of many different people who are in themselves very different and would never feel comfortable around each other to some extent. But because they're comfortable with this central person, in this case Bhakti Charu Swami, then they feel the ease and the determination and the inspiration to work together as one unit. And we always know that the sum is greater, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So what many people produce is far more than what a group of people could produce individually working on their own. So the effect of a Vaishnava who was very inspirational, the effect of a Vaishnava who was a great role model, the effect of a Vaishnava who was able to understand things, was soft-spoken, and yet very perceptive. All these things will be missed greatly in our society. And I'm just now trying to grasp what's happened. It isn't as if the devotees didn't think that this outcome was possible. Usually we know from a medical point of view that when somebody has to get seriously hospitalized for COVID, likely the outcome is that they won't come out of it. That's kind of the general prognosis when we talk about people who don't just have a brush with it, but have a serious lapse into it. So it wasn't as if this outcome was totally unexpected. However, we still hoped that somehow Krishna would pull Bhakti Charu Swami through. It appears that Krishna has some better plan for him. And we know that we are just little tiny chess pieces on a large chessboard that spans not only many countries and many planets, but also many spheres of time and many lifetimes. So Bhakti Charu Swami will certainly be engaged in some other aspect of pushing on Krishna consciousness in some way. Or maybe Krishna will want him just to remain with him in the spiritual world. It's hard to say. But one thing we can say is that in the last 3 weeks, in a number of places where I've been giving class, the main subject or the main focus of the class has been on Maharaj Pariksit leaving his body. So that was in, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we learn about that in the chapters at the very end of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so if someone is a perfect example of how to leave your body, then we could look at Bhakti Charu Swami as being this perfect example of how to leave your body. Most people try to drag on, clutch on in fear and anxiety or in disbelief or denial that they are going to leave their body. But others actually understand the true eternal nature of the soul. And at the time of leaving their body, they don't feel the same kind of apprehension, confusion, frustration, or denial that the common person does. I always feel that when one of our group leaves, when someone I know leaves, I pray that when I am called to leave my own body, they will be there to help me make the transition from a living in a material body of a particular one that we're accustomed, and to leaving it behind and entering the afterward, the beyond, which is the further manifestation of Krishna's pastimes for us. Each one of us has a plan, and Krishna has a plan. And we will be called forward in some way, in some shape, in some form, to something else. So in Krishna conscious philosophy, there is no loss. Yet, paradoxically, we feel there is a loss. On the spiritual level, there is no loss. On the level of our personal realization and our personal social connections, there is a loss. We can feel it. And generally, when we feel ourselves cut off from Vaishnavas, we feel this sense of loss, and this is normal, and this is a part of spiritual life. However, in the larger picture, we know that everything goes on for all of us. Only in a very narrow perspective do we think that life has ended. So I will now start to speak about our particular subjects for today. And this is a class that's on Bhagavad Gita 1.40. Is that correct, Atma? I think that's what I was told by Sasha.
Yes, Maharaj. Hare
Okay.
Krishna. Thank you. and Maharaj, since I'm speaking, one comment for those of you who are on a video. The best thing is, I think most people know, but if you're on video, then you should sort of be looking at the camera in a still position. And if you're sort of going in and out of the room or doing activities, you can. One nice thing with Zoom is there's a function you can click on to black out your video. So that's best if you're not. Otherwise, it's a little hard to to focus because we see everyone. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Maharaj. I apologize.
Okay, so this verse 1.40, it says, "From the degradation of womanhood comes unwanted progeny." And I have subtitled this as "Everything is destroyed when sex becomes the goal of life, and everything becomes degraded when women and men mix without caution." So unofficially, I titled this particular session, "Everything hits the skids when sex life takes over." So that's a little less of a, high-sounding title, but I think you all get the picture. And in this particular verse, there's a lot to unpack. And so I couldn't have enough time to do everything I need to do today with, speaking a little bit about Bhakti Charu Swami, and then trying to tie together all the loose ends. So let me go to the verse in Bhagavad Gita, and here we have it. Adharma bibhavat Krishna pradyusyanti kulastriyaha strishu dushtashu varshneya jayate varna shankaraha. Adharma bibhavat Krishna pradyushanti kulastriyaha strishu dushtashu varshneya jayate varna shankara. So the translation of that, actually let's do the word for word. Adharma is irreligion, so dharma is religion. Adharma is irreligion. Abhibhavat, having become predominant. Krishna, O Krishna, pradyusyanti, becomes polluted. Kula striya, family ladies. Strishu, by the womanhood. Dushtashu, being so polluted. Varshneya, O descendant of Vrishni. Jayate, comes into being. Varna, Shankara, unwanted progeny. So the translation then as a collective reads thus: when irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. So I'll read that again. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. So here is, I'll read the purport. It's not very long. Good population in human society is the basic principle for peace, prosperity, and spiritual progress in life. Varnashram religious principles were so designed that the good population would prevail in society for general spiritual progress of state and community. Such population depends on the chastity and faithfulness of its womanhood. As children are very prone to be misled, women are similarly very prone to degradation. Therefore, both children and women require protection by elder members of the family. By being engaged in various religious practices, women will not be misled into adultery. According to Chanyaka Pandit, women are generally not very intelligent and therefore not trustworthy. So, the different family traditions of religious activities should always engage them, and thus their chastity and devotion will give birth to good population eligible for participating in the varnashram system. On the failure of such varnashram dharma, naturally the women become free to act and mix with men. and thus adultery is indulged in at the risk of unwanted population. Irresponsible men also provoke adultery in society, and thus unwanted children flood the human race at the risk of war and pestilence. Adharma bhibhavat Krishna pradyusyanti kulastriya Srishu dushtashu varshneya jayate varna shankara. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. Okay, so there is a lot to unpack there. And let me try to get into it here, because this is one of my soapboxes. I think that in general these kinds of things are misunderstood in our society, and even in the world at large. These things are great sources of irritation and controversy. So let me make some statements right off the bat here, that the whole idea that we see in the Vedic literatures about these statements made about women, you will also see similar statements made about different races and things like that. And in our modern society, these things are often taken as very controversial and very demeaning. But let's take a look at this a little deeper, because I think if this one point comes across today, then I will have accomplished something. I don't know if I'll get to the rest of the whole presentation that I have, but if I can get this one point across, then I'll feel I'm been successful. And I think this is a very important thing. When the Vedas speak about classes, demographic classes of people, like women, Vaishyas, Sudras, etc., we see that there's certain statements made about the qualities of individuals of these demographic classes. However, at the same time, just try to focus on this. We are taught that we are not our bodies. We are taught that the situation that we have been born into is like what we call a upadi, a designation. This lifetime, I may be in a male body. In another lifetime, I might have been in a female body. In another lifetime, I might have not even been in a male human body or a female human body. I might have been in a male or human or male or female body of some other species. So the body itself is not us. The soul, in some situations and in some points of view, is considered not to have gender. But actually, the soul does have gender. It might not be the same gender as the external body, because we have an original form called a swarup. And this original form is the form with which we engage in pastimes with the Supreme Lord in the spiritual world. So that form already exists. It's an eternal form. It has nothing to do with our present situation in the material world, because our present situation in the material world is a throw of the dice, according to our past karma and our material desires, all nicely averaged and, factored together. We wind up with a particular body of some kind. It might be a male body, it might be a female body. And in ancient times, when things were not so mixed up as they are today, we know this is the general result of the ongoing progress of the age of Kali Yuga. That in Kali Yuga, we find that things get more and more mixed. In one place, Prabhupada uses the analogy of an artist or a painter who works with three primary colors, red, green, and blue. And if you mix red, green, and blue, you mix 3 times 3, you get the possibility of 9 colors. So each one of these colors can be mixed to create 9 colors. So 3 by 3 makes 9. Now you can mix those 9 colors again by those 9 colors, and 9 by 9 makes 81. So what we see is a gradual mixing of qualities. We live, of course, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later if we have time to get to it. We live in a culture which pushes political correctness. And, I'm actually not against political correctness in some of its features. I think it's good that in general people don't remind each other of the frailties and the faults to which their demographic type may be prone. So it's, I think, a good thing that our society has come to acknowledge that. Why should people constantly be reminded of what they could wind up doing wrong, in such a way that it makes it seem inevitable? That's one of the things that I think is a positive outcropping of political correctness. But there's a dark side to political correctness as well, a side where people can't see the forest for the trees. So the idea put forward by the Vedic literatures, which generally collectively class women, Vaishyas, and Sudras together, which means that these are the lower classes. But of course, this is assuming there's somebody occupying the higher classes, which in Kali Yuga is a null set, of people occupying the higher classes. The verse in the Vedic literatures is Kala Sudra Sambhava, that in the age of Kali, everyone is a Sudra. So there are no higher classes. So if we're talking about trying to feel superior because you're in a higher class, well, forget about it. There aren't any. We're just all chickens here, all of us in Kali Yuga, all of us Kali Yuga babies are born in a not the best of the offerings on the shelf, you could have paid more and gotten something better. But nonetheless, that's the way it is. And on top of it, because as Kali Yuga progresses, things become more and more mixed, that qualities become more randomized. Yet there are still trends. So although qualities are in general more and more randomized in Kali Yuga, there are still some general trends. So what these apparently disparaging comments in Bhagavad Gita or in Bhagavatam or in any of the Vedic literature, or for that matter, even when Prabhupada says it, because Prabhupada's only saying what the Vedas are saying. If you really look about it, if you want to point the finger at Prabhupada for being misogynist or being a racist or a gender chauvinist or something like that, you really need to point the finger at the Vedic literature itself, because it's all that way. But at the same time, just try to understand the Vedic literature, while enumerating and sometimes detailing the particular flaws or negative tendencies to which a particular group is prone, while detailing these, it reminds us on the same note that we are not the body. So therefore, we should rise above our designation. And this can be done. However, we will not automatically rise above it. If we make no effort, we will most likely follow and become victimized by the flaws to which our demographic group is prone. And every demographic group has flaws. They're just different flaws. one demographic has one collection or set of flaws, and another demographic group has a different collection of flaws. And in this way, we are not supposed to try to pretend that all these flaws don't exist, or wave a magic wand and rubber stamp people beyond them. The real spiritual progress is made when we understand that we need to cross over the flaws by engaging in spiritual life. And spiritual life promises that if we engage in chanting, devotional service, association with devotees, reading of scripture, etc., and the activity of trying to engage others in spiritual life, if we do those things, then these flaws will be eradicated. And the tendency we have towards making these mistakes over and over again will be lessened and finally removed altogether. And therefore, this is the point that I want to make, this simple analogy here. What's more important, your shoes or where you're going? Our karma, where we were born, or what our body was, our body type when we were born, in like our shoes, and the destination that we're heading for, our goals, they are far more important than what shoes we're wearing. So a person who may have been born into an unfortunate body, unfortunate political situation, an unfortunate time, an unfortunate, race or gender or whatever it may be, someone who was born that way, can simply make an effort to overcome it. And if they do, then fine. And that's why at the same time it mentions in the Harinan Chintamani and other Vedic literatures that to consider a Vaishnava to be of a particular race or gender or nationality or caste, to consider a Vaishnava to be of a particular race, gender, caste, or creed, such a person has a hellish mentality. This is because that's the whole nature of Krishna consciousness. The nature of Krishna consciousness is it guarantees us, if we're practicing it properly, that we are rising above our designation, our upadhi. Upadhis are designations. They're like stickers on suitcases. They say where we've been. And if we have the wrong one, we might not be able to get in, according to various customs officials. So the upadhis are these stickers on our suitcases. And therefore, we need to simply overcome them. We need to overcome them. And we see that no culture makes any progress if they do not base their leadership, if they do not base their social structure on competency, spiritual competency or material competency. To favor people because of some abstraction like past karma or past birth or something like that, and to ignore actual spiritual or material competency, it never works. It never has worked. It never will work. It's not Krishna's plan. Krishna does set up the varnas and ashrams, but they are not based on birth. They're based on qualification. So if someone in a so-called lower birth qualifies themselves, they're more important than a person of so-called higher birth who has made no effort at spiritual upliftment. So another aspect here is the fact that the family is talked about in this particular verse. And in Christianity and most religions, and even in most past culture, the family has been seen to be very important. And that's not an accident, and that's not a mistake. The family always is, always will be a very important thing. You cannot write it out. But be aware that the whole idea that there should be families is under severe heavy attack in our modern world right now by many forces, especially the modern push of postmodernism. Everywhere we look, we are, starting to get propaganda that the family is some kind of an arbitrary or abstract thing and doesn't really matter that much. Because many of us and many people in the modern world have such dysfunctional families, it's no surprise that people feel or think that way. But children need protection, love, and stability. And so it looks like we just had a crash there. I don't know who crashed, me or them. Yeah, Atma, I see you now. I see you're calling me too.
Okay, I disconnected the call, Maharaj. No need.
You disconnected it.
No. I mean, you said you see me calling.
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah,
call.
It looks like my internet just crashed and I just disappeared off the screen. So sorry about that.
And before you disappeared off the screen for 30 seconds to a minute, we didn't hear you. And then at one point, then we didn't see you either.
Right. I probably froze first and then I disappeared.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of way that people die in Zoom. They freeze first and then they disappear. So, but what I really am trying to get across here, let me back up a little bit and we'll go back over it. So let me, the importance of the family. So let me go back with that, that children need protection, love, and stability. So the family is not some kind of artificial thing. It's a very, very essential thing to the nature of spiritual progress, not only for the individual, even for a functional society, if it's not even that much based on spiritual principles. If there's instability in families, then this will create havoc. It's been known, and it's even known by many researchers today. So children need stability, love, and protection. They need both parents. And those two parents should stay the same parents for the entire life of the child. Of course, we see that this is not happening, and this is the exception now and not the rule, to find that two parents have stayed together throughout the entire life of a child. Of course, this is up to the fact that Kali Yuga vitiates the good qualities of people, and people tend to not be able to stay compatible for very long. But there has been a great attack in general on the family unit, and so therefore people are not aware of how important it is that the family remains as a unit, that children are brought up, and that trying to pretend that the family is not a very essential thing in the life of a child is ruinous. Of course, it's true that it takes a village to raise a child, so the child's full education, full nurture has to come from a wider base. But the family unit is very important. And So that's one of the points that I wanted to make. The first point is that, we see a kind of separation of men from women in Vedic culture. And as Prabhupada one time said, women are good and men are good, but women and men can be no good. So I think to most people it's obvious that generally when men and women are in close proximity, there is gravitational tidal forces that are at work on both of them. And that's why men and women in close activity, in close proximity over periods of time is a tricky affair. And anyone who doesn't think it's so, I think, needs some remedial work in basic reality 101, that this is just the way things are. It happens all the time. And now, the Me Too movement has certainly brought that to the foreground, that it's easy for things to go south. And that's because of emotional and sexual drives. People find it hard to control themselves, especially during long, protracted, constant association. And there's no way to turn back the clock. We can't go back to Vedic culture. But what we can do is understand the dangers that are involved and understand how to cope with some of the dangers that are involved. It won't work just to be aware of it. Of course, here we have a picture of Krishna and the Gopis, and if we read about them, it looks like they're breaking all the rules. And in fact, they are. But, Krishna is God. He can do things we can't. But what might be not apparent to some is that the bottom line of what Krishna and the Gopis find attractive about each other is not their bodies, not their style, not their dress, not their music ability or any of these kind of things. What they find attractive about each other is their devotion. That's what actually is there. And sex is not a big thing in the spiritual world. However, it is a big thing in heaven, which might seem surprising to some of us who have come from a Judeo-Christian background, that Mark Twain once opined that there was no sex in heaven. But Mark Twain, I'm afraid you are dead wrong. There's plenty of sex in heaven, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But in the spiritual world, it's not a thing, because that's not what people come together for. There are more intense forms of emotion and more intense forms of association. But anyway, I don't want to digress too much, and it's easy to digress with a topic like this. So let me kind of stay on course and on focus here. So the next point that I want to make is that proper relationships between the genders is the core of spiritual life. And here we hear a story about Markandeya Rishi. That's what this particular painting is of. Of course, I'm aware that it isn't just men to women or women to men, but now there are many flavors of people getting together and having emotional and erotic relationships. I'm aware there's all kinds of flavors. But the basic idea is still the same, that sex life has to be controlled, and it has to be restricted. The less it's restricted, the more damaging it is to the individuals involved and to the society as a whole. So that's why keeping proper relationships between the genders is a core of spiritual life. If people helter-skelter associate, then we have every opportunity for all kinds of unwanted events to take place, where people will be adulterous. It's quite plain that often people use sexuality as a weapon against one another, or Some people see it as a game, and somewhere in the process of sexual intercourse, you're calling a child, and then what do you want to do with that child? Just get rid of it? So these are the issues, and then there's diseases, and then there's so many other things that are a part of this process of coming together. So proper relations between the genders is the core of spiritual life. This is Markandeya Rishi. And in the Bhagavatam, in 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 8th chapter, from which the whole of the 8th chapter from 1 to 49 describes the story of Markandeya Rishi, which was asked about by Shomaka Rishi to Sutta Goswami. And Markandeya Rishi was very powerful and very pure in his engagement of spiritual life. He had a father, Mrikanda or something like that, or Markanda. I forget what his father's name was. And Markandeya Rishi's father performed a lot of sacrifices and penances so that when Markandeya Rishi became older, he would be renounced and self-controlled and pure and spiritually focused. And he was. And so after taking initiation as a Brahmana, he began to engage in various activities for further purification. Particularly, he worshiped God in 5 forms. He worshiped God in the form of the spiritual master, the Brahmanas. He worshiped God in the form of the super soul. He worshiped God in the form of the sun, and also God in the form of, I forget what the 5th one was, but he was performing particularly meditation. So he was meditating with his eyes closed and trying to connect with the super soul in the heart. And while doing this, he did this for enormous length of time. We discover that Markandeya Rishi actually lived through an entire night of Brahma. And that's a ridiculous duration of time. And there's nothing going on in the night of Brahma. Make it worse, during the night of Brahma, there was no land, so he had to float around in the water all that time. And during that time, while he was floating around in the water, he saw a young, tiny baby on a banyan leaf floating. And he looked at that baby, and as that baby smiled, all the water started to go into the baby's mouth and dragged Markandeya Rishi into his mouth. And so, of course, this was baby Krishna, who was benedicting Markandeya to see him on this giant lotus flower. On this giant banyan leaf. So, Markandeya Rishi then, while meditating, he went through 6 manvantaras, which is also a huge length of time. And Indra began to take notice of this. And Indra began to take notice of this going of this meditation of Markandeya Rishi. And because he began to worry that Markandeya Rishi might take his own post, he sent Cupid, or Pradyumna, along with Apsaras to tempt Markandeya Rishi from his austerities and practice of spiritual life. So, here we've got a real face palm. It's not bad enough that sex life is so in our face. It's not bad enough that we're all so prone to it in various ways. It's not bad enough that these situations just come all the time. But then we have the demigods sometimes purposefully trying to target us as well. So, can't we get a break? I mean, cut us a break. Gee whiz, So at any rate, Indra thought that Markandeya needed to become diverted. So he sent Pradyumna and these Apsaras to dance. So these Apsaras are the heavenly damsels, which provide sex contact for the demigods in the heavenly worlds. And in the heavenly worlds, people don't get pregnant there until they're just about to leave heaven. That's when the Apsaras get pregnant, and they get one, and they bear one child, and then they die, and that's it. So if you want maximum material enjoyment, heaven's where it's at. That's where they have it. And so he got some of the most beautiful ones, and they began to dance before Markandeya Rishi. And as they were dancing in front of Markandeya Rishi, they were playing with balls, and one very well-known Apsara was running around in front of Markandeya Rishi, and the wind caught her clothes and blew them off, and Markandeya Rishi didn't budge. And then after they'd done this for some time, the Apsaras and Cupid, or Pradyumna, began to feel a little uneasy, and they began to feel a little bit of a burning sensation. And they, as the Bhagavatam said, felt like children who were playing and realized they were playing with a snake, that they were in serious trouble. Of course, Markandeya Rishi did not curse them or anything like that. He was able to hold his own. He didn't become disturbed. He didn't fall, nor did he become angry with them. There are stories where when they try to tempt some people, they are actually punished by the people they try to bring about the loss of their spiritual attainment by tempting them. So in this case, Markandeya Rishi withstood the temptation. But why can some people do it and some people can't do it? Well, that boils down to how much we are actually serious about spiritual life. If we are serious about spiritual life, then we will find that even in the association of the opposite sex, we will not feel so prone to being misled or diverted into sex activity. So in general, we see that Vedic culture restricted association between men and women, but this was not a slam against women. It's just a recognition of the strong tendencies of the attraction, romantic and sexual, between human beings. And if we want to have a reasonable society, we have to do something about this. We can't just mix willy-nilly and do so over a long period of time. It sets the stage for all sorts of unfortunate things to take place. So Vedic culture restricting association was not because the men of Vedic times thought women were putrid or something like that. This is a crazy idea. I don't know how people come to those kind of notions. It's because that the Vedic culture understood the danger of close association between men and women. And even now, our own society is amazing, starting to wake up to this, that in the workplace, in the police force, in the military, practically anywhere you want to mention, in the medical environment, in jurisprudence, in any kind of human occupation, now there's a great opportunity for association between men and women, whereas in times past, many occupations were largely staffed by men, but now they're staffed by both men and women. And so therefore, there is much more opportunity for things to go wrong. And even our modern society is starting to wake up to the fact that we have to somehow or another get a handle on this, figure out how to control and eliminate some of the more obvious and more frequent types of issues that come about as a result of men and women associating in the wrong way. So before I go on too much further, let me just talk about this one point here, which is the reasons why Arjuna has declined to fight, because this is all a part of the overall picture of the Bhagavad Gita, that Arjuna has been placed between both armies. They're just about to shoot the first arrows, and Arjuna decides he's not going to fight. And now Krishna hasn't said anything yet, but he will. And these are Arjuna's 5 basic reasons why he has decided not to fight. And as we see, the reason in the very middle, destruction of dynasty, is the one that's showcased in this particular verse. So from Bhagavad Gita 1.36 to 1.44, this theme of destruction of dynasty is Arjuna's main philosophical reason, or main philosophical evidence that this is a bad thing, that they're engaging or getting ready to engage in this fight. So overall, Arjuna has 5 reasons: compassion, enjoyment, destruction of dynasty, fear of sinful reaction, and indecision. Compassion, he felt that why should they fight these Kauravas who are not aware of the danger and the sin that they're engaged in. And so by refraining from fighting, they should just take a humble position and not have a kingdom. So compassion was one of his reasons. And of course, where that's evident is in the first chapter 26, first chapter 37 to 38, first chapter 44 to 45, and the second chapter 4 through 5. So Arjuna describes all his reasons why he's not fighting in the back end of chapter 1 and the very, very first few verses of chapter 2. And then around chapter 2, verse 8 or 9, that's when Krishna takes over and begins to gradually disassemble Arjuna's various philosophical rationale for why he doesn't want to fight. So then there's enjoyment. He says, how can we enjoy a kingdom when the people for whom we wish to have the kingdom are all dead? We had to kill them to get the kingdom. So that's in Bhagavad Gita, first chapter 31 through 35, and also in verse 44. Destruction of dynasty, which we're on right now, is Bhagavad Gita, first chapter 36 through 44. And fear of sinful reaction is the 4th reason why Arjuna is neglecting or hesitating to fight. And he feels that if there is a battle and people die, that he will be personally responsible for having taken their lives. And this he voices in, of course, first chapter, verse 36, and the second chapter, verses 2 and 5. And finally, the last reason is indecision. So in the second chapter, the next chapter, Arjuna will say that we don't even know whether it's the best thing for us to fight or not. So Arjuna has enumerated these various reasons for not fighting. And after enumerating them, he asks Krishna what Krishna thinks. And Krishna will tell him what he thinks. And that's basically the entire Bhagavad Gita. That's what Krishna will do, is tell Arjuna what he thinks about Arjuna's reasons not to fight. And, spoiler alert, Krishna doesn't think much of Arjuna's reasons not to fight. And he explains why, under some circumstances they might be worthwhile, but in the present circumstance, these various reasons Arjuna is putting forward are of no particular importance. So let me ask if there are any questions coming back from our audience at this time, from those who are part of this Zoom conference. If you have any questions or comments or realizations about any of this. I'll give you all a moment to unmute yourselves. And I'm sorry I had to kind of pull through all that. I just didn't have a good place to stop until right about this point.
I have a question.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Go ahead, Carmen Gloria.
Thank you. Thank you for a very enlightening discussion. I come from a Judeo-Christian tradition, so sometimes, obviously, there are some conflicting thoughts that come up. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about that there is sex in heaven, given this is at a spiritual level, my understanding is that in heaven people do not have bodies, so it's sex totally different from what we understand. Am I correct? And my second question is, if I hear the statement just there is sex in heaven because Krishna and people who are at that level can enjoy sex and in a way that we are not supposed to, unless it is within a relationship such as marriage. My question would be, aren't we supposed to act, think and behave the way God does, in this case Krishna? Isn't it that what we are attaining to do? And why would it be a different standard for what we do than what our model is? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Those are good questions. And I'm glad you asked them, because that will help me to once again go over some of these points that I think are very important to understand. The first point to understand is there's a difference between heaven and the spiritual world. The Vedic literatures talk about what are called the heavenly planets. They're called Devalok also in Sanskrit, the places where the Devas live. The heavenly planets are the destination of those who live according to Vedic principles, those who live piously. They go to heaven. However, that is not where the Supreme Lord is. The Supreme Lord is beyond heaven in the spiritual world proper. Because heaven or the heavenly planets is a material place still. It's still within the material world. And in the heavenly worlds, people have material bodies. They are not the same type of material body as the one we have. They have form. Certainly they do. And that form is like our form. However, their bodies are not made of the material elements the way our bodies are. They're made of the material elements, but in a different proportion. So they have abilities, and their bodies don't get old. They don't stink. They don't have the kind of medical issues that we do. They live for thousands of years. But still, they're in a type of material body. And they are allowed to have sex because generally people go to heaven because they want to enjoy the results of a life where they built up good karma in this world. The Vedic literatures do describe such a thing, but those who are Vaishnavas, those who are following Nivritti Marg, never think of this as the real goal of life. They think the real goal of life is to go to the spiritual world, which is beyond heaven. It is Vaikuntha. There are also spiritual planets. And in the spiritual world, people also have bodies. But those bodies are not material at all. There's no material elements in the spiritual bodies. Those bodies are made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So that does not mean that they're ghostly or formless, as is thought in modern Judeo-Christian, and for that matter in most religious circles. People have this idea that in heaven or whatever, the afterlife, one becomes kind of ghostly or insubstantial. But the spiritual world is even more substantial than this world is. In fact, that is the thing that this world is a cheap copy of. Our present material world is a cheap copy of the spiritual world. That's where things really exist. Now, as I was mentioning before, Krishna does things which seem provocative. He dances with the Gopi girls in the middle of the night, but he's not having sex with them. He's dancing with them. And in our modern material world, sex is kind of the final bottom line, what everybody really wants to get around to at some point or another. It's the purpose of most relationships. It's the end result of most economic struggles. We want to get money so that we can attract and be able to maintain a sex partner that we feel, attracted to. Of course, we're putting things in very, very cut and dried terms. And I know that there's all kinds of other stuff going on as well, too. There's all layers where people genuinely care about each other and this and that and the other. But, for the most part, our society really does revolve around having some kind of really constant and pleasurable sex encounters, one after another. Usually, at least it was, we would have them with one partner, but these days, it's kind of up for grabs, And so this is not the thing that people are after in the spiritual world. What Krishna does is he has pastimes with the gopis, who are not his married wives. In fact, apparently, these gopis are married to others. And so, now why would that be? Why would Krishna set such a bad example? And even in India, many people are embarrassed to talk about Krishna. They talk about Ramachandra, who only had one wife, and he was, faithful to only one consort. But Krishna doesn't do that. He has uncountable consorts. In fact, when he was in the material world doing his pastimes here on this plane, on the earth plane, Krishna had 16,108 wives. So that's, polygamy with a vengeance there, But Krishna was also able to expand himself into 16,108 forms simultaneously. So if you can do that, then maybe we'll look the other way if you do something similar. But nobody can do that. Only God can do that. And as a matter of fact, we learn as we get deeper into religion that a conjugal relationship with God is the relationship everyone should try to have with God. Now, that doesn't mean that we are hoping eventually to have sex with God. That's not the mentality that we are trying to get across. We're hoping to have an intimate relationship with God. And for relationships to be very intimate, and for the pastimes, the leelas, to have interesting aspects to them, then there have to be all kinds of other elements. If you make a meal and you cook a vegetable and you don't put any spices in it, it's not very palatable. Similarly, if you make a story or a pastime and you don't have any spices in it, it's not going to be very palatable. So Krishna himself builds in these apparent obstacles to his own pastimes by making it appear that the gopis are actually married to other men. And so they have to dodge around and try to, engage with Krishna while hopefully not being spotted by their elders. So this makes it seem as if Krishna is promoting irreligion. But we see that when understood correctly, this is not promoting irreligion, because all the major yogis and Vaishnavas and sages of India all understood Krishna, and none of them were leading lives like that. So why is that? Because there's another element, and that is that what Krishna really finds attractive about the gopis is not their bodies, because he is their bodies. He's everything. It's not what they can do, because he's their ability as well. The thing that he finds attractive is their constant dedication and focus on him. That's the one thing that he's really longing for, not anything else. He's the source of all pleasure. All sex pleasure comes from Krishna already. He doesn't need to do something to get it. He already is it. So what we're seeing is that in the creation, the crafting of an interesting pastime, there have to be, as we find in any kind of drama, there has to be an antagonist and a protagonist. There have to be some obstacle. There has to be a goal. There has to be a struggle to reach the goal. And then on the other side, there's some enjoyment. And so this is not just in the material world, but this type of thing exists in the spiritual world as well. To make a pastime interesting, Krishna appears to have to sneak around. It makes the pastime more interesting. He's not doing anything wrong. In fact, everyone aspires to be intimate with Krishna. He's not doing anything wrong. He has got that intimate relationship with not just the gopis, not just with 16,108 wives, but he has that relationship with everyone, every being in the entire universe. So this is why he doesn't play by the same rules that we do. But he's not doing what we do when we try to imitate him. When we try to imitate him, we've got certainly another agenda. And what we achieve by that agenda is not on any kind of par with what Krishna is doing. So it's a little hard to understand. But if you try to make an effort to look deeply into Krishna consciousness, you'll begin to see that not only is this reasonable, it's the only thing that makes the entire universe make sense. What is God actually doing up there? Just listening to cards and letters of, Julie wants a pair of skates, Jimmy wants a sled, what's he doing up there? Just answering people's, gimme mails, No. He's not doing that. He has other aspects of his energies that deal with those kind of things. He's enjoying. Krishna is God, so he doesn't have to do anything. The only purpose or the only thing on Krishna's agenda every morning when he gets up is to enjoy. But of course, he enjoys a little bit differently every day. And he enjoys with different people every day. And he enjoys with many people simultaneously, but in different ways. And so this is the real hidden aspect of the spiritual world. This is what the spiritual world is about. And just as another matter of point, that the gopis are considered to be married to other cowherd boys. But actually, there's a pastime where Krishna was eating lunch with his friends, the other cowherd boys, the ones that are said to be the husbands of the gopis. So he was eating lunch with them, and Brahma came, and he wanted to test Krishna, so he took away the cows that they were supposed to be minding. So as young boys, they were supposed to be tending cows, just as the older men are supposed to be tending or calves. So just as the older men are tending cows, the younger boys tend calves. So they were all disappeared because Brahma put them in a cave and put them to sleep. And so the boys said, we are supposed to be tending the calves, but they're all missing. We have to go look for them. And Krishna said, no, don't worry. I will look for them, and you all continue eating, because I don't want to disturb your lunch. So Krishna went off to look for the calves, and while he was gone, Indra kidnapped all the boys as well and put them to sleep in a cave. And so now Krishna's got no calves, and no boys. So he knows that this will create anxiety for the parents. So he duplicates himself as all the missing cows and all the missing boys, all simultaneously. And he does this for a whole year, because what happens on Indra's time scale is different from what happens on ours. And what was only a few minutes for Indra turned out to be a year for us down here on the earth plane. So for an entire year, Krishna did substitute duty for all the missing boys that were asleep in the cave that that Brahma put them there. And he did missing duty for all the young calves that were also asleep. And then, of course, when Brahma saw that he thought he had played a pretty good prank, but then he discovered that, hey, look, the boys are still there. The calves are still there. I thought I put them in a cave. So he went to the cave and discovered they're still there in the cave too. So he said, what's going on here? Then he realized there were two sets. And so as he realized that there were two sets, and he realized there's only one person that could do this. And then he looked at the boys and the calves, and they all took on Vishnu four-armed forms. And he understood that Krishna had duplicated all the boys and the calves. And it's interesting that during this 1 year, while Krishna had substituted as all the cows and the young boys, while he'd been their substitute, that was the year that the gopis married these so-called husbands. So they were actually marrying Krishna. But later on, when they came out of the cave, they took up, and Krishna retracted all the duplicates, and the boys went along on their merry way, not even noticing that a whole year had vanished from their lives. So, we can see that there are different ways to view these things, but essentially, Krishna's not after the same thing that humans are after. And it's, I think, very key or important to note that the motivations that Krishna actually has are very different from our motivations when we do some of the same things. Because Krishna doesn't need anything. He already is everything. No one can give him something he doesn't already have. Nobody can do something for him that he can't do for himself. The one thing that Krishna doesn't have is each and every one of us. But he doesn't want to force each and every one of us to want to have a pastime with him. Then there would be no such thing as love. We have to do it voluntarily. For us to do it voluntarily means there has to be another opportunity or another alternative to being part of Krishna's pastimes. So to be part of Krishna's pastimes, we have to do it voluntarily. And if we decide we don't want to do it, then there has to be a place for us to not do that. And that's what you're looking at here. That's this material world. We're all here because we did not want to voluntarily have Krishna as the center all the time. We wanted to be the center ourselves. So this material world gives us that alternative virtual world where we can be little gods and goddesses ourselves and pretend the entire universe rotates around us. And we can try to mimic the things that Krishna does. But when Krishna does something, he does it and it's real. When we do it, it's a show bottle, fake version of it. And we usually have base motivations for doing it, especially in the material world. So that's why we can't put the pastimes that Krishna does and our own pastimes on the same level. Though, I'll tell you right up that many people do, and many people do think this way. So do with that as you will. So thank you for those two good questions. So I appreciate that. Maybe I helped or maybe I didn't. I don't know.
Thank you.
Maharaj, I have a quick follow-up question. So you said like this while these boys were stolen, Krishna, he also married all those like Gopis.
I couldn't understand that at all. It came through kind of mutilated by the Zoom system.
Do you hear me now?
Sasha, you want me to repeat for you?
No, I can repeat. Do you hear me now, Maharaj?
Yeah, I hear you. It's not that it's loud, but it's just, it's coming out like that. I'm having trouble understanding.
Let me, okay, I will try to repeat. So, you said Krishna, he married all those Gopis while he was replacing like these stolen boys.
Yes.
Right, but I didn't see this particular mention in the Krishna book. Like, is it in some other source that he married them? Like,
yeah, it's in some. I'm not sure exactly which Vaishnava literature that's sourced in, but it's definitely there. The many acharyas comment on that at some point because sometimes there's a need to just disabuse people of some of these, commonly held misconceptions. In India, there's so many commonly held misconceptions. In the Western world, we're lucky. We don't know nothing about Krishna, so we don't have any misconceptions about him. But in India, people have all kinds of misconceptions about him. So for centuries, Vaishnava teachers and acharyas have had to use these examples to kind of gradually get people to understand. This philosophy is deep, and there's certainly some things that are different from the way the Judeo-Christian model works, But if you try to understand how the Vedic model works, you'll see that it really does make sense through and through, and it paints a picture of a God that is a reasonable God. It paints a picture of a God that's a loving God. It paints a picture of a God that, no one can understand everything about God, but at least you can understand way, way more than most people do.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, maybe I'll wrap up my presentation with a little bit left that I have not yet done.
Maharaj, I see there is question in the chat.
Oh, a question in the chat. Let me pull up the chat and see what it says.
So it's up to you, Maharaj, if you want to wrap up. Okay.
We can wait for that during prasadam. That one, Chandrasekhar Swami. Or prasadam, after the kirtan.
Okay.
Marj, I think
Okay.
we can actually, because it's a little late, I think probably what we should do now is do the, wrap up. So if you want to have closing words without addressing any more questions, that's good.
Okay.
And then do the last kirtan. And then I know Miguel had a question. He knows we can talk about that after the kirtan for anyone who wants to remain in a more casual format without the program officially going on anymore.
Okay, so here's my last little bit here, that we are, as a movement, Krishna consciousness, not uniquely. All other religious, spiritual, philosophical movements, including atheists, are also under pressures from our modern social norms in our society. And we cannot really allow ourselves to be bullied by them. On the other side of the coin, I make a strong point on the other side of the fence, nor should we completely ignore them. You know, that there are a lot of things going on in our society, and we have to be able to address some of these issues. And I think it's important that we address these issues in a truly spiritual and knowledgeable way as best we can. And we will understand that some people will be able to grasp what we say and our proper intention, and some people will misunderstand us. I mean, that's, you know, unfortunately, that's just, sociology 101, you know, that no matter who you are or what you say, some people are going to get it and some are not. And, some people are ready for Krishna consciousness and some are not. However, we can actually try to present Krishna consciousness in a complete and in a systematic way. And particularly, not only in the outside world, but even in our devotee society, we see that more and more women and men are working together and acting together. There's not really much we can do about that. But at the same time, we should never forget that there are certain inherent dangers in that, that by working together, there's a chance that some kind of emotional, erotic, or social dynamic will evolve between the people who are working together. It's just a tendency. So we should always kind of be on our guard and try to, understand what possibly could happen. And it's not like married people are exempt from this. I mean, these powers work on everybody, whether they're renounced or they're married, or they're the only ones it doesn't work on much are children, so most of us are past that stage. But these powerful social forces are at work in our society, and they're at work in the outside world as well. More and more people are working in coeducational environments, whether it happens to be government or medicine or academia or agriculture, you name it. Everything is now starting to become populated with members of both genders. So society has yet to really rethink how to structure human interaction, especially in the workplace, in the current setting. Whereas one time when a man went to work, he was surrounded by other men. And then, he went back and then he would see his wife. But this isn't the case anymore, and it's not likely to be the case again anytime soon. Therefore, society needs to develop new rules for how to manage this, because what we do see is it ain't working. That our modern society, the Me Too movement, has brought that to the foreground, that if you just work side by side and you aren't careful with what you're doing, all you need to do is throw a little bit of alcohol into the mix, and then you've got even more crap headed your way, because this is the problem with the idea of people becoming too much focused on sex and spending too much time together with people of the same sex. Or it's people of different sexes. For that matter, even people of the same sex, if that's your orientation. So this whole thing has to be gradually back-worked. We have to work in a backward direction by recognizing that no matter who you are, whether you're a man or a woman, or whether you like men or women, or whatever it is, you have to recognize that gradually purifying yourself of sex attraction is the goal of your life. It may take some time, and it probably will take time. This is the one single material desire that is the top of the heap for the entire world. It's not an accident. It's not something that happened recently. It's been that way since time immemorial, that sex is called Adi Ras. It is the original motivator for the material world. So if you can somehow get free from it, you've done something. You've really accomplished something. And husbands and wives should work towards it as well as they get older. We've been talking about that too, how from the 50s and 60s in their lives, they should gradually untangle themselves from the workplace, from the occupation, from the children, and move towards a setting where they are collectively going out to either visit holy places and focus on the Supreme, or they're directly engaged in outreach to help others to become spiritually conscious. So this is how progressive people think. This is how knowledgeable people think. To just drag on in sex life, even toward the latter stages of life, shows that you really have not understood what life is for or about. So at any rate, I'm not going to belabor that point anymore. We had to go through a bunch of stuff today, and there's more I could get into, but I don't want to muddy the waters anymore. And thank you all very much. And what do? We Kirtan right now, or what happens next?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay.
If you can please lead a short kirtan for about 5 minutes, that'd be wonderful. And
okay.
A reminder to the rest of us, so we can chant nicely in our own homes, locations, and you can clap if it supports your absorption in the kirtan. So please be absorbed if you can in the kirtan, and but you'll be muted, so we'll only be hearing Maharaj. So when Maharaj sings, every time he sings Hare Krishna mantra, then we repeat after him, but he'll repeat with us. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parvajikacharya, Tarahata Shishiman. Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, all glories to Assembled Devotees. All glories to Assembled Devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All right, Atma, take it away. It's all yours.
Okay. I just I was attempting to unmute everyone, but then at least one person, there's a bunch of noise in the background. So then I muted everyone again. So you can unmute yourselves if it's appropriate, you know. I'd like to thank very, very much His Holiness Chandrasekhar Swami for his really nice association this evening. Very, very nicely explained a challenging subject matter in a way that helps us to be more Krishna conscious, to understand Prabhupada's teachings better, and also to address any misconceptions about our teachings, whether it's from outsiders or, occasionally even from insiders. So it's really good to know these things. And I don't think it could have been presented any better than how Maharaj did. It was so nice. I really thank you for that, Maharaj. And also, of course, my wife has been following for the last 2+ weeks His Holiness Bhakti True Maharaj's situation where he had got the COVID and went on a ventilator, following all the reports for his health. And I sometimes looked at it myself, the reports, otherwise Subhanga reported to me. So I was following along as well. And so I heard also Krishna Kshetra Swami, your guru, speaking something nicely about it, his departing this world. And Chandrasekhar Swami spoke really nicely for all of us. I'm aware that probably for quite some of you, you may not be familiar with Bhakti True Swami, and yet I think Chandrasekhar Swami's discussion about this is so relevant nonetheless, because it helps us to understand about the purpose of living in this world, the meaning of death, and the difference between one who leaves this world as a great devotee of the Lord and one who doesn't. So I think it was very edifying and helpful. I hope everyone felt the same, even if you weren't familiar with His Holiness Bhakti True Swami. In any event, I'd like to thank you so much, Chandrasekhar Swami. And for those of you, you can maybe here, I'm gonna try unmuting people now. So if you've got stuff in the background going on, please mute yourself if that happens to be you. So I've done that, and now I thought I did that. Anyway, however,
it looks like there's a good portion of people unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd appreciate it if people for those of you who are not muted, if you can join me in expressing appreciation for Chandrasekhar Swami, for appreciation for helping us be more Krishna conscious and having a spiritual evening together with his leading us. So I can't read that while I'm talking. Please join me in expressing Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare.
Okay, and I also have, I think I may have an announcement. And also, okay, fine. Carmen Gloria Maharaj, she wanted me to thank you for her because she was really appreciated your responses to her questions, as did I. And also, I'd like to announce for next Saturday, I'll tell you who is giving class here. And of course, for those who haven't been here before, we have this same program at the same time through this same Zoom. And I believe it's generally with the same link, but every Saturday. But while speakers are to be announced going forward, they're to be determined except for next Saturday. That I know already. So I'll tell you, it's His Grace Brahma Tirtha Prabhu. And one of the benefits of our meeting together via Zoom is that we get to have speakers who don't generally come to New York or don't come to our program to speak. And this is an example of that opportunity we have. So Brahmatirtha is based in Gainesville, or in Florida, and he's a Prabhupada disciple, and he's highly intelligent and very fun as well. He's funny, and he also is the person he's one of the two primary persons about which the book Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers, the dialogue in that book, he's one of the two persons having the dialogue, him and Srila Prabhupada. So he's asking questions to which Srila Prabhupada provides answers. So if you want a little background on him, check that out. And he happens to be a family man, so to speak. So he's got a wife and grown son and grandchildren, I believe, if I remember correctly. He's an example of someone who is very successful in the spiritual and material realms too. Okay, so that is it for our formal program. Thank you all so much for everyone who came tonight. Nice to see you all, and hope to see you next time. And at this point, some people can. The program's over, so you can leave, and I'll just stay on if maybe a few people want to stay on and chat about something or other, and maybe Miguel wants to go over a question with me or something. So thank you, and again, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.